we're live right now. We're live right now. We're
Alright,
live right
cool.
now. We're
Alright,
live right
cool.
now.
Guess we can wait for a few people to trickle in first.
Sure. Alright. Welcome, everybody. We already got a couple viewers in here. I'm Opposition. Tonight we'll be hosting a very special event. We're going to take a look at one of these really strong meta decks that has been a little bit modified to a contemporary version. With me tonight, I got a special guest. It's Phazure. Hi, Phazure.
Hello, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming on.
For sure.
So before we get started, I wanted to ask maybe a couple of questions of you. Let the fans get to know you. So how long have you been playing Hearthstone for?
Playing Hearthstone since around the Nax release, just after the Undertaker nerf, so it's been almost 8 years at this point, I think. Basically been free to play, hit my first Legend with Aggro Rogue about 6 months later, proceeded to hit Legend basically every season after that until Classic started to hit. And then by that point, I started to get kind of fed up with Standard, and so I decided to focus exclusively on Classic. Standard got to the point where the power creep was kind of excessive. You were playing basically randomly generated cards as opposed to the opponent and the 30 cards that they started with. And so I really appreciate the determinism that Classic Hearthstone has, as well as the nostalgia, I guess.
Yeah, you know, there's always a little bit of both elements there. That yeah, it's fun to go back in time and kind of play the game as it used to be. But you know, I think there are a lot of folks out here who are kind of in the same boat as you, where they get frustrated that opponent gets to discover a million cards. They get to reduce the cost of all of these cards, and it doesn't always feel like you're playing the deck that you started with. And same with your opponent as well. So you probably find some kindred spirits here in the Classic community.
Yeah, it just feels a lot more like, chess in a way in which there's a lot more determinism and you know what you should be playing around, as opposed to, you discover something, you have like Pavling books, you have things like that. It's not very fun, and I prefer to know what I'm up against most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely something to be said in Classic about playing around your opponent's threats, setting up a board that, if you're expecting swipe or one of those AoE board clears, that you put minions on the board that are going to at least avoid a little bit of that, right? So, you've gotten a little bit of notoriety here for this Midrange Hunter deck now. For the viewers in the audience here, this started off as a deck that was created by Life Coach, an old professional player from way back when. And he named this Sunshine Hunter after his daughter, Sunshine. Now, there are a couple of differences between your version of the deck and the original Sunshine Hunter. What was it that gave you the idea to look at this old deck, kind of modernize it a little bit, and start playing it on the ladder so much?
Yeah, so I would start by saying that I've always been more of a Miracle Rogue player. I've always enjoyed Face Hunter and Hunter in general because I like aggro. But starting off with Miracle, there are a few matchups that I didn't particularly enjoy playing against, namely the Mirror matchup, Handlock, and Freeze Mage. And I wanted a deck that was able to kind of smash that, as well as any other aggro deck, any other non-aggro deck, around the ladder. And so I went to the other class that I enjoyed, Hunter, and looked into what kind of mid-range Hunter lists were around. And the list that I started out with was actually one by Raynad. I'm not sure if you can pull up the original list from like a Chrome link, but I'll send that to your opposition.
Yeah, if you can get me the deck code, I can put it in here and we can take a look in the client.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it should have the deck code inside that link.
Awesome. So you see this Reynad Hunter originally. So you play this. How long do you end up playing this before you start to make some modifications to it?
I think right off the bat, when I first looked at it, there were a few cards that looked very suspicious to me. The first one being Flare, and the reason I didn't really like Flare is because Hunter in general should be smashing the classes that, or the things that Flare is relevant against, right? It's Freeze Mage, or Mage in general. And Hunter should generally smash Mage. Secondly, there's Paladin, which has secrets, but no Paladin ever plays secrets. And then finally, there's Hunter, where against Hunter, generally the faster Hunter should win. And so you're going to be losing against Face Hunter. And then in the mirror matchup, I feel like you can kind of just outskill them instead. And Flare isn't necessarily worth a slot against a deck that's also not very common in the ladder.
Right, and there are other ways to deal with stealthed minions as well. Cards like Deadly Shot are able to get around stealthed minions, so it's not like we lose completely the ability to control a rogue, for example. But I can't help but agree with you there that Flare sometimes can feel kind of weak, and cycling a card for one, well, it's not always helping you advance your board state either.
Yeah. Additionally, with Flare, even against Miracle Rogue, in which you're trying to kill their Stealth Auctioneer, you play Flare on turn 6 or whatever, after they've coin concealed, and you still have 5 mana to deal with their 4 health. And it's really not all that convenient to kill in the first place. You would need something like Stonetusk Boar, Bow Shot, or Kill Command with a Beast on board. And in practice, it's not very practical. That you would have that, and so I don't think it's worthwhile to do that. I think it's better to tech in Deadly Shot instead, in which you have 3 mana. It's very common that they only have 1 minion, their Stealth Auctioneer, on board, and you just kill it outright with 3 mana and have 3 mana left that you can do whatever else with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Deadly Shot, it's not, you're not always completely out of the woods against a stealthed Gadgetzan with Deadly Shot. They can always try and put down an extra minion on the board. Sometimes, really important to make sure that all of their minions are cleared going into that Gadgetzan turn. But okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. I'm wondering, let's start building this deck from the beginning, and I'm hoping that we can kind of find the core cards of the deck that are really important, the ones that kind of define the archetype. So what would you say is the most important card?
Yeah, I'd say the most important card is probably Highmane, Unleash the Hounds, and Hunter's Mark.
Alright, so yeah, Savannah Highmane. Who doesn't love this card, right? 6/5, Death Rattle, summon 2/2/2 hyenas. Very tough for a lot of classes to deal with. Even if you silence it, get rid of those 2/2s, it's still a pain to deal with a 6/5. Now tell me a little bit about this card. It's got 5 HP. Is that a significant number over maybe like 4?
Yeah, compared to something like 2, 3, or 4, 2 is easily dealt with by almost any removal. 3 is dealt with more easily by things like Wrath, Spell Power, Backstab, Kill Command Raw, Lightning Bolt, Rockbiter Weapon, things like that. 4 mana is dealt with by things like Eviscerate, most notably, Spell Power, Lightning Bolt as well. But 5 damage is pretty hard for many classes to deal with. There are not a lot of cards that natively deal 4 damage. Spell Damage Eviscerate is one of them. Kill Command with a Beast on board is another. And then Lava Burst from Shaman is the other. And these are all kind of niche. Oh, there's also like Holy Fire from Priest. But these are all fairly niche, and it's very difficult for people to deal with 5 health. Additionally, in the matchup with Druid, you have cards with a lot of 4 attack. You're talking about your Yetis, your Cairn, your 4/6 Druid of the Claw, and those do not trade favorably into 6/5. Yeah. Whereas 6/5 really does. You have the 6 damage to kill, your 6 attack to kill the 4/6, and this is just an uber high value card that's difficult for a lot of slower decks to deal with. And this is one of the reasons why it can crush a lot of these other decks, these slower decks.
And the Death Rattle's nothing to balk at either. You get 2/2/2 hyenas, which are not so easy to deal with either. We have things like Fan of Knives that deal 1 damage to the board, or an unbuffed Blade Flurry. So having 2/2/2s pop out of this hyena is non-trivial as well. Those can be kind of a pain to deal with. You don't want to use double backstab. If you've killed the Highmane, you've already invested some resources in that, and then to additionally expend whatever resources you'd need to kill these hyenas just makes it all in all a really tricky card to deal with. Okay, so you said
very often get like a 2 or 3 for 1 just for this Highmane, as well as some loss of health for example, from like a deadly poison hit or a fiery war axe hit. And there's also additional synergies that can be had with the 2/2s coming out. You have Starving Buzzard, which can give you 2 cards if you trade with it on your turn.
Right, so there's always this threat. If you play the Highmane and your opponent doesn't silence it or remove it, then we can trade that in on the next turn and play Buzzard first, meaning that we even get to draw 2 cards off of the Death Rattle there as well, which is a very powerful effect. Now, you had mentioned another core card here, Unleash the Hounds. Tell me a little bit about that card. I think we might have lost your audio there. Try and get that audio back in here. Okay, so we've got Savannah Highmane so far. We've got Unleash the Hounds. Now, Unleash the Hounds has a lot of potential with this deck as well. A couple of different tools that we can use with it. We'll see those in just a second here. Number 1, Starving Buzzard. We've already kind of talked about this card a little bit. Whenever you summon a beast, draw a card. So if your opponent has a large board, lots of little creatures, talking zoo, something like that, an aggressive deck, being able to play this Buzzard and then being able to play Unleash the Hounds for 5 mana, you might even be drawing 5-6 cards off of this. Compare that to Gadget Zan. It costs raw 5 mana just to even play the Gadget Zan onto the board. So Starving Buzzard, huge potential with Unleash the Hounds here, a lot of synergies.
Back if you can hear me now.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So yeah, walk us through this Unleash here. So what are some of the ways in which we can use this card? Because I think I've seen a lot of people make the mistake of using Unleash the Hounds all by itself just to clear a board. You run them into the opponent's 1/1s or 2/1s. So tell me a little bit about how we use this in the context of the deck.
Yeah, when I think about Unleash, I like to put in the context of like what makes the deck broken. When it comes to something like Miracle Rogue, the things that make it broken are Auctioneer and Prep, maybe Sap for like some slower decks. When it comes to Druid, you have things like Innovate, Wild Growth, and the things that make this particular deck broken, I think, are Unleash the Hounds and Hunter's Mark. And Unleash the Hounds is a card that can shit out like a lot of tempo and value from cards like Juggler and Starving Buzzard. So on a lost board against an aggro deck or zoo, the only way you can win really is by using something like Juggler Unleash. And as an opponent, when you're facing against Hunter, there's probably nothing that you hate more than seeing Juggler Unleash on 5. So when you're playing this deck, you really want to think about how can I survive long enough to play the broken stuff. Absolutely. That is the kind of clear that you really need to make the deck work. This is the broken stuff that you need to give yourself the opportunity to play. The second thing is Buzzard Unleash the Hounds. And against a lot of slower decks, namely Druid and Control Warrior, you have a lot of value, but they ultimately have more value unless you draw. And so what you really need to do is find opportunities to draw a lot off of Buzzard. And the way you do that is with Unleash the Hounds. So you really want to find opportunities where you can draw at least 2 to 3 cards, if not more, from this. And I
think we might have lost your audio there again. Not a problem. While you're getting that set up, I'll put in our famous knife juggler here as well. Now, one other thing I'd like to mention about this deck as well is you've got 2 choices. We haven't taken a look yet at some of the removal options that we've got in here. But let me just put those in right now. We've got 1 freezing trap and 1 deadly shot. So here's the thing. If you go tall against...
Not getting value out of it.
Okay, I got you back now. Yeah, so if the opponent is going tall, we've got these tools like Freezing Trap, Deadly Shot in here, and we can remove things like an Ancient of War. And if they decide to go wide with their deck, now all of a sudden they're playing into Juggler, Buzzard, Unleash the Hounds kind of things. And especially on later turns, being able to set up like double Buzzard into Unleash draws a hell of a lot of cards. Double Juggler into Unleash the Hounds, absolutely lethal against Sue decks. Now, I was curious here. You've got just one copy of Deadly Shot, just one copy of Freezing Trap. Can you kind of explain what was it that made you decide to just bring a one of in each one of these? I think we might have lost your audio one more time. That's totally okay. And as you're getting that, I think I might know some of these other cards that are going into the deck. Given that we're playing Midrange Hunter and we have so many beasts in the deck, Kill Command is a very obvious choice. Not only does it help us remove our opponent's minions, sometimes on 3, take down a SI or a Earthen Ring. It can also do 5 damage. That's an Ancient of Lore that we can take down with it. And other 5 HP creatures that might be useful to kill with Kill Command. Also can target the opponent's face, so if we're playing against something like Handlock, we always have that option of hero powering, using our kill commands in order to get around those big Molten Taunts as well. A couple other cards that we can throw in there. Eaglehorn Bow. Kind of just a...
Can you hear me again?
No, I can hear you. Yeah, absolutely got you.
God damn it.
It's okay, man. Don't worry about it. Okay, so so I put in a couple of kill commands here for us. I put in a couple of Eaglehorns. Now, kill command I think is a pretty obvious card to put in here, but I wanted to ask you about this Deadly Shot Freezing Trap combo, because sometimes folks who have made this list have put in 2 copies of Freezing or 2 copies of Deadly Shot, but you've got one of each. So how does that work, and what are these designed to help counter?
Yeah, so they're both removal tools that help you regain board control, but they both help in different ways. When it comes to Deadly Shot is something that can kill a minion outright. This is especially important when it comes to a deck to classes like Druid, Warrior, and especially Rogue. Deadly Shot can kill your 4/6, that's solo on board, can kill a Baron Geddon, a Rag, a Stealth Auctioneer, and it's just really efficient removal for certain matchups. Now, on the flip side, you have Freezing Trap. And Freezing Trap is similar, except it has synergy with your bow and also deals with specific other threats that Deadly does not help as much with. These cards are Sylvanas and Cairn, as well as Leeroy, when Miracle Rogue is starting to set up their final burst damage. Basically, they just can't send the Leeroy damage into your face because it's going to go back to their hand with 6 mana cost. And this can really help you delay the game to find the additional damage that you need to send to their face before they can outrace you. I think that having one of each is helpful here because you basically capture the upside of both in different situations. Having 2 deadlies doesn't give you the protection against Sylvanas and Cairn or Leeroy, and then having 2 freezing doesn't give you the kills against Stealth Auctioneers or Stealth Auctioneers are like Ancient Wars and stuff.
Right, exactly.
And so I think that one of these is a good balance here.
Yeah, I like this choice. Now, it does mean that we have to be a little bit judicious about when we use them. Can't just, throw out a Freezing Trap whenever we want. We probably are going to wait maybe a little bit later in the game to try and set that up, just so that we snag one of those really big Death Rattle creatures. Don't get worried about, some minor minion charging in. Okay, so we've got Freezing Trap, we've got Deadly Shot. Now we've got 2 copies of Eaglehorn Bow here, and we got a question in the chat already. Why play 2 copies of Eaglehorn if you're only playing 1 copy of Freezing Trap? What do you think?
The point of Bow is not necessarily to gain synergy with the secrets. The point of it is really to push damage as additional burst, as well as to clear minions. Against Rogue, you very commonly see, there are 3/3 drops. And you need some way to contest that. And having 2 copies of Bow gives you the consistency that you need. If you're only looking at your minions, your 2 drops are primarily Knife Juggler, Scavenging Hyena, River Crocolisk, and like Stonetusk Boar. These don't really contest your 3-drops well at all. And so Eaglehorn Bow is really what you need to help clear things and maintain board control, as well as push damage in the mid to late game.
Yeah.
The synergy with the bow is kind of extraneous. It's nice when it happens, but you don't necessarily need to count on it, unlike something like Crusher Hunter.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we imagine a traditional start here. Rogue has the coin. We play Knife Juggler on 2. They coin out SI. And we need an answer for it, right? We don't necessarily want to use a kill command because it's using it for 3 rather than 5 damage. We'd much prefer to use the bow to clear instead. Alright, we got the start of the list so far. We got 16 cards. How about this guy, Houndmaster? You got 2 copies of him in there. Help us understand. We don't see this in Face Hunter, ever. Why in Midrange Hunter do we have this Houndmaster?
Houndmaster is a card that can really help you snowball the game in certain matches such as say Druid, or help you trade efficiently. It has synergy with Stonetusk Boar on T5. You play Boar, Houndmaster, and you can immediately trade into like a Rogue 3/3 or just send it to face. And that's 7/6 worth of stats for 5 mana. Pretty decent. Generally speaking, because basically all of your deck is beasts except for like Knife Juggler, it's not incredibly hard to find value for it. And even when you don't find value and play it as a 4 mana 4/3 on 4, it's not really that bad, frankly. Generally, I think that if you are playing it when you're already behind, like you've kind of already lost, but I like Houndmaster because it also gives you like protection against getting lethal to yourself in the case of aggro or zoo matchups, or rogue or druid to protect against combo. I think that you can almost always find a reasonable value from Houndmaster, and that's why I include 2 copies.
Absolutely, and that's the only 4-drop in the deck as well. Now, the original version of this deck, or some of the original versions that were floating around way back when, like 7-8 years ago, they would be playing Oasis Snapjaw as one of those creatures that if opponent leaves it up on the board, getting a Houndmaster on that would be really strong. I was curious, what was your reasoning behind not including this Oasis Snapjaw in the deck?
Yeah, I kind of think of Snapjaw as a kind of impotent card. It doesn't really do much against your 3-drops. 3/3s and 2/7, it does not trade favorably, and you still need some sort of ping. It only really does some kind of work when you do pair it with Houndmaster, but because both are in the 4 mana slot, you either need to coin it on 3 and then Houndmaster on 4, or you play it like 4/5. It's a little bit awkward and it's a bit committal. I just don't think that Snapjaw does enough compared to other cards that you could include in the list.
Yeah.
2/7 is just really slow for really minimal impact, and you can only get decent value with it out of Houndmaster, which is, I don't think that conditional is worth having in the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've got our little jingle about this card, the Boar's Core. Tell us about the Stonetusk Boar, and maybe try and convince some of those haters out there exactly why this card belongs in the deck.
Fucking godlike. Boar has synergies with so many cards inside the deck. Starting from the top, you have Hunter's Mark, and this is something that it enables Hunter's Mark for retarded amounts of tempo. So on turn 6, for example, you can play Tiger, Boar, Hunter's Mark against a 4/6, and then you immediately have a 5/5 on board. It has synergy with Night Juggler in the aggro matchups if you really need like a quick ping. It gives you, the boar, sending the boar into something as well as a knife. It has synergy with the 2 Scavenging Hyenas, in which you can very easily make a 4/3 out of it. It has a synergy with Starving Buzzard, so if you have like 7-8 mana, you play and Unleash the Hounds, you draw into a boar, you've just drawn another card by playing boar. I think that is pretty understated, because to make Buzzard really work, you really do want to have more cheap beasts within it. You have synergy with Kill Command if you need a quick 5 damage, or like just some kind of enabler for it. It has Houndmaster synergy, 5 mana, play Boar, Houndmaster. You have 7/5 worth of stats. 7/6.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all of these synergies, in conjunction with, its ability to help out a little bit with aggro, make it more than worthwhile a card. And competing card for this slot is Timberwolf. I'm not a fan of Timberwolf because it's not a proactive card. It is something that relies on you actually having a board in the first place to do something. And in a meta with like a fair amount of aggro, frankly, I just don't think that Timberwolf has enough value. You can't play it early on and expect to get like much of any value from it. Whereas you can play Boar, send it to Rogue's face like 3 times by their turn 2, if they hit it, of course, and that's already 3 damage. Whereas Timberwolf is not doing nearly as much. So Timberwolf being contingent on you having a board is not something that I liked in this deck. And it doesn't synergize with Hunter's Mark, doesn't synergize with Hyena, not Houndmaster, because you don't send 3 to face immediately. I don't think Timberwolf is worthwhile.
Yeah, and it even has some anti-synergy here with Savannah Highmane as well. If you manage to stick a Timberwolf and you play Savannah Highmane, all of a sudden, instead of having 6 attack, it's got 7, and it's within range of BGH, which is not a perfect way to deal with the card, but certainly a lot easier if your opponent doesn't have a response already. So yeah, I would agree with you. I think Timberwolf, there may be certain situations that it could be very strong with Unleash the Hounds, but that immediate board impact, I notice a lot of these choices, that immediate board impact is so important just to make sure that you can kind of maintain that tempo and keep going.
Yep.
So River Croc, that's in here too. I think it's a neutral card, isn't it? So River Crocolisk, yes. Tell us a little bit about River Crocolisk.
River Crocolisk is your best 2-drop, or your best vanilla 2-drop that you just want to play in basically any matchup. The most important thing about this, other than it being a beast, is that it has 3 health. And people kind of shit on it for being a flavor text card, but this 3 health is really important in a lot of matchups because it ducks a lot of removal, such as Backstab, Innervate Keeper of the Grove, Eviscerate without any combo.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say with Houndmaster, it has some synergy as well. One of the things I notice about this deck is that as we're playing these minions out early in the game, maybe Stonetusk Boar, but probably just the River Croc, the Scavenging Hyena, there's always this threat of Houndmastering, right? And your opponent doesn't really want to do their own thing on their turn if they're going to leave a Croc up going into, well, whatever turn it is, 4 or more. Because all of a sudden this little dinky 2/3 ends up becoming a 4/5 with Taunt, which is a little bit of a pain to deal with. We've already kind of talked about how 5 HP is kind of a magic number where it's difficult to remove. So River Croc, not just good at controlling the board early, but also good at establishing a threat, a follow-up threat here with the Houndmaster as well.
It can well contest against things like 2/1s from aggro decks, and it doesn't die immediately to coin SI, unlike Juggler and Hyena. And in those matchups, if I'm on the play and not on coin, I often prefer to mulligan away Juggler and Hyena in search of River Croc, because it's just so much more resilient. In order to kill it, people need Backstab Ping, or coin Deadly Poison, or some prep, which is, all of those would be much more of a win than losing it, your Juggler or Hyena to, just a raw Backstab without taking 2 damage, or raw Evis, or coin SI.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the extra 3 damage really helps. Or 3 health helps.
Now there's another card here that I don't think was in any of the original lists. Maybe I'm mistaken, but this Stranglethorn Tiger. You got 2 copies of Stranglethorn Tiger. What's the purpose of this card?
Yeah, with this card, it helps primarily with the Rogue matchup. Stealth is not something that can be interacted with ordinarily, and so against Rogue, which is chock full of removal with Stab, Eviscerate, things like that, you really need something which can help you push the damage. And Stranglethorn Tiger is just that. You have enough early game, such that you don't necessarily, there's not much more that you can pack into, but Tiger also provides a lot more value that can be used against your warriors, your druids, and I think that this is just the right mid-range card that you need to help, give more value to the deck and push damage against Rogue.
Yeah, absolutely. It also, there are plenty of decks that play Big Game Hunter, but it should be noted that playing a Stranglethorn Tiger, you do get a turn of a minion with stealth, and you have the opportunity, if you want, to play Houndmaster with that as well. So a 7 HP taunt may be really difficult for some decks like Zoo to deal with if we actually make it that far, or some of these other aggro decks that don't have good removal options, maybe like Face Hunter. So it does give us an opportunity to do that. Not really a super common thing, but worth mentioning that sometimes we can Houndmaster our Stranglethorn Tiger.
Yeah, and even though it can become a target for BGH, you don't necessarily have to play Houndmaster on the 5/5. You can play it with another 2-drop like Hyena, and then you have a 4/3, 4/4, and a 5/5, and that can be just as hard to deal with. Or if they've already played, if they've already played BGH, you can still just make it a 7/7 and trade into a 4/6, for example.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it also represents a source of potential face damage. If the opponent just doesn't have a taunt, well, maybe that's 5 damage to the face, and when you're playing against a hunter, usually it's kind of scary to take 5 to the face.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a couple of other cards in here. Let's see if we can find my boy here. Okay, so you included Leeroy. Leeroy I don't think I've seen in any of the original lists. What was the impetus behind including Leeroy in the deck?
Yeah, when I was first playing this, I noticed that you can get bored to some degree, but you did have some problems trying to close people out. And basically, I was wondering, okay, well then, what is the other burst I could add into the deck? And Leeroy is the most natural fit.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of liken it to Zeus playing Doomguard, because Doomguard is something that Leeroy, it was just hard to find that final damage in a lot of matchups, and it allows you to push face harder than you normally might be able to. Without Leeroy, you kind of have to play a bit more of a control-y style with the deck, and that's not really where Hunter shines the most. And so I think Leeroy is a very, very natural inclusion inside this kind of list, or any Hunter, in my opinion, frankly.
I think that just in general, a lot of times, one of the difficult things, especially in Classic, where you don't have just board wipe after board wipe every turn, is, excuse me, how and when to go face and when to trade, right? Because sometimes it's very advantageous to trade. Sometimes, though, you just have to pull the trigger, and you just have to say, look, I have a couple more minions on board. It's time to just go face, right? And don't worry about whatever your opponent's going to do. And Leeroy kind of enables that, right? Because when you're sitting with a Stranglethorn or some other, maybe you've got an Eaglehorn equipped, and your choice is, do I ping off or trade their minion, or do I go face? Well, knowing that Leeroy is in the deck, we can be a little bit more confident when we're making that choice, right? Okay, let's see. We've got another one of here, and this one's actually really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. 1 copy of tracking instead of 2. What led you to believe that one copy was the right number?
The original version of the list did actually run 2 tracking, but the original version also lacked Leeroy Jenkins. And so when I was looking through the deck and wondering what to actually cut for Leeroy, there wasn't any other card that I felt like I could justify cutting except for tracking. So tracking does help with the consistency of the deck to some degree, but I think the upside of having something like Leeroy instead more than makes up for that kind of loss of consistency. In fact, I would say that Leeroy makes the deck more consistent overall. Yeah. Another consideration for what to cut could have been something like Houndmaster, but I still felt like Houndmaster got enough value and was reasonably consistent enough that tracking was more of a cut than Houndmaster. So I think it's kind of subjective exactly what you want to cut for it. 2 tracking, 1 Houndmaster is probably also fine. I know that Thunder has also started to run a list like that. But personally, I think that 1 tracking is sufficient enough.
Yeah, and tracking's an interesting card. I think sometimes it's underestimated. Part of the reason that tracking is so powerful is that, let's say that we need Leeroy in order to win the game. We got 10 cards left in our deck. Well, Leeroy is one of those cards, but if we have tracking in there, then we're getting pretty close to a 2 in 10 chance to win the game. And doubling our odds for getting our last out is pretty significant, right? So tracking not just a card that's like, oh, make your hand a little bit more consistent or top deck your answer or something. It's really improving the statistical likelihood that you're able to find the cards that you need without having to actually draw that card itself, right?
Yeah, it also has curve benefits in which on the play, you don't really have any ones except for Stonetusk Boar, and you don't always want to play it there. So you can just toss in a tracking there and look for something that you could use. And being 1 mana, it's not especially hard to include it in your curve overall.
Right.
And so tracking is just a generally good card.
Right. Now, I want to also mention there's an additional synergy we didn't talk too much about here, but Leeroy Jenkins actually has synergy with Unleash the Hounds as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so Leeroy always gives 2 tokens unless their board is already almost full. And so Leeroy Unleash is a total of 9 damage for 7 mana. But if they have more, it can, add in a lot more burst than they might be initially expecting. Now, better players should probably try to account for that and play around Unleash, but, not everyone necessarily does that or can afford to. And so this can lead to some, large amounts of burst damage.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the last 2 cards in the deck, I believe, were Nosdormu and King Mukla. Does that sound right?
100%.
Yeah. No more watching rogues draw cards. We've been discussing this recently, and maybe we could get your thoughts on it. So there are 2 possibilities that we've got for the last 2 cards. There's Jungle Panther, Stealth 4/2, and Animal Companion. Now, I think both you and I have been running Animal Companion for quite a while, but recently kind of been experimenting. Do you want to share your thoughts on this Animal Companion versus Jungle Panther debate?
Yeah, so a lot of the times, the card or the companion that you really care most about is just Hopper. You want to send 4 to their face, and then push your damage that way. Leok is something that you very seldom want to see, and Misha, you'd rather cash in that 4 damage immediately. You're usually trying to be the aggressor, and Misha is just okay, I'd rather cash in that 4 damage. Now, Jungle Panther, what it has that companion doesn't have is consistency. You know exactly what you're getting, and you also get some instantaneous board pressure. Board presence that can't usually be dealt with. It can be dealt with something like Consecration or Poison Flurry or Spell Damage Fan, or I guess Avenging Wrath maybe. But for the most part, it's a lot harder to deal with. And what this also allows you to do is guarantee a Houndmaster if you already have that in hand. Then with Houndmaster, you have 6 damage that you can send into face, which is pretty non-trivial.
Yeah.
This also allows you to get more immediate value with cards such as Scavenging Hyena. So basically, we're introducing more synergy from this, whereby if you play double Hyena on turn 4 after having a Jungle Panther put down, essentially you can immediately cash in on trading the 4/2 and then getting 2 4/3s in return. I think that 2 mana 4/3s is pretty decent. And yeah, the last point is that Jungle Panther may be better against Rogue than Animal Companion. Rogue can generally deal with the companions Misha and Leok by Eviscerate or Coin Essay, in which you basically got no damage out of it. But with Panther, you can usually send that to face or trade into a 3/3 if you don't have Bow or Kill Command already.
Right.
And so I think they're better in that matchup.
Right. And a lot of cards that will be played in response to Jungle Panther on turn 3, cards like SI or Earthen Ring, when we buff this with Houndmaster, it goes up to 4 health. Now, we don't have to choose to send that 6 damage into the 3/3, but we can. We can take a Houndmaster on Jungle Panthers and allow it to trade in. That leaves us with a 6/1 and a 4/3 on the board. So I found, it improves the flexibility of the deck a little bit. We got a question in the chat here. Why not a copy of Mukla?
Yeah, this is something that we were also discussing, and I'm not 100% sure whether Mukla is or isn't better yet. It's just something that we haven't had the time to test. Now, the argument for Mukla, I think, is that it can buff your matchup percentages against decks, the slower decks, namely Druid, Warrior, and Rogue. Now, playing Mukla on turn 3 is obviously really strong in those particular situations. But another concern is, what if you're playing it later? You're playing it later and they have, more resources to actually deal with it, such as like Shield Block, Shield Slam. They already have a board in which it's harder to, to want to play Mukla because they also get bananas and can help trade favorably into it. I think that Mukla has a lot of potential if you play it on curve, but other than that, it may be detrimental and something that becomes harder to fit into your mid to late game curve.
Yeah, that was sort of my concern with it as well, is that I feel like surely playing Mukla on 3 is a very difficult thing for an opponent to deal with, but if it comes down any other turn other than turn 3, then we're starting to run a lot of risks, giving them bananas, like you mentioned. If they have a board already and we're giving them 2 bananas, well, maybe that's a really big taunt that we have to get through now. And so, yeah, I'm not 100% convinced either way on it, but I do think that if I were, going into turn 5 or something like that, I would much rather top deck a Jungle Panther than King Mukla.
Yeah, with Panther, you can basically just play it and forget. It's about as proactive as it gets, and they may need to react to it with a consecration or spend mana on like some kind of removal like that.
Right, exactly. Alright, so we've got the full list here. We've heard a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about some of the matchups that we have for this deck. So let's start maybe at the kind of heavier end. So thinking about control decks, how does this deck do against Warrior?
Yeah, so this deck should generally kind of smash the heavier decks such as Warrior, Druid, slower decks such as Mage, Handlock as well. Generally, the main advantages of this deck are that it has a lot of early board presence. This deck is basically premier Hearthstone. You play your 1, you play your 2, you play your 2, you play your 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's kind of hard for the opponent to deal with amidst you playing Hunter's Mark as well, drawing some cards with Buzzard. Another advantage is that you have the burst. You have 2 copies of Kill Command. You have 2 bows, and you have Leeroy Jenkins, which allows you to be kind of aggressive against those decks. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, against a matchup like Warrior specifically, I think that the mulligans that you would want here are River Crocolisk, Highmane in particular. Bow is okay, Tiger is okay, and Buzzard may also be a keep. And the reason is that against Warrior, they have a lot of card draw, and so it's kind of hard to tire them out. So typically, if you're not drawing, you're going to run out of cards first. And so you need to find some kind of opportunity to draw several cards, and Buzzard is your only real card draw here. And so you're usually going to be able to find an opportunity to do Buzzard, Unleash or Buzzard, and 2 beasts or so by the mid to late game. And that is something that you almost always need to actually win the game.
Yeah, I would say, the Warrior is sort of put in a position against Midrange Hunter where you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Either you start to put down big tall minions like Geddon, Rag, things like that, and those just get deadly shotted. The death rattle creatures like Sylvanas and Karen get freezing trapped. And if they decide to go wide by playing Taskmaster, Armor Smith, Acolyte, things like that, they're just not going to do much damage to you, right? And so we can kind of wait, let them build up a board, and then we get a huge Buzzard Unleash off of them. And all of a sudden, we filled our hand up, right? And there are actually very few decks that are truly able to fill their hand with so many cards, even including Rogue, for so little mana. Setting their opponent up like that. So I would think, I've noticed that keeping Buzzard in my opener just makes me feel a sense of security. It's not like I'm going to die in the beginning of the game, right? And at some point the opponent will have to put down minions eventually, and then we get to just play Buzzard Unleash and draw the rest of our deck.
Yeah, so with Midrange Hunter against Warrior, there are kind of 2 ways that I can sort of play out. The first is that you have an actual curve, and you can just play them and then eventually exhaust them out of removal. But alternatively, and this I guess goes for like decks in general and not necessarily just Warrior, you may have a hand where you're a lot more control based. You don't really have all the minions, but you have cards like Hunter's Mark, Unleash the Hounds. And in those situations, what you really want to do is be very patient. You want to try to extract as much value as you can out of your Unleash to draw as many cards as you can. Before making like a really strong mid-game push, when you have like just a lot of minions that you can just toss out and make it hard for your opponent to remove. But essentially, with like a mid-range deck, it depends on like the matchup, and it depends on your hand texture. You sometimes may be playing the control matchup, and sometimes you may be playing the aggressive matchup. But especially for the control matchup, you really need to be patient with your Unleash the Hounds and not let your Unleash be like a fucking 3-mana arcane explosion.
Right.
You really want to milk it for like another turn if you know you can and you're not going to die. And against Warrior specifically, they don't really have a lot of early game pressure. So even if you kind of brick, it's not really that bad against Warrior specifically, because it takes them a while to actually build any kind of threatening board, and then you can sit on it, and then once they have a board of 3 minions, then you can Buzzard Unleash and draw a lot of cards, and then eventually outvalue them that way.
And it doesn't matter how much mana the warrior has or how many cards they have in hand. They don't have a good way to deal with the Highmane, right? No matter what. Probably the best way to deal with it is we play Highmane first and they respond with Sylvanas. Maybe Sylvanas Shield Slam. But even then, dealing with the second Highmane, probably going to be pretty tough for them. We got another question here, and another interesting question. I think we've talked about this before. What about Snake Trap? How do you feel about that card, and why doesn't it make the list?
I don't think Snake Trap really helps enough. You get 3 1/1s, but they also have to trigger it, and it's very easy for them to know that it's your Snake Trap. Essentially, Snake Trap I think is more valuable against like aggressive decks, but the target for this deck is not really aggressive decks. It's more so the control decks. Another argument could be something like Juggler and having synergy with Juggler and Starving Buzzard. But in practice, people are often like kind of wary of that anyways, and they'll remove them without just hitting into it with a minion. And so you almost in practice you just never really get that value that you're like imagining in your head. And so I've tried it like a bit, but then like instantly hated it when I played 2 mana and it's basically never getting value.
Yeah.
Freezing is a much better choice here.
Right.
And I'm not sure what I would cut. Like, is Snake Trap really better than any other card here?
Right, exactly. I think that's sort of what I've encountered as well, is you think about the dream of coin Snake Trap into Knife Juggler. The reality of that situation is that very seldom will somebody say, oh, a Knife Juggler with a secret up, I'm sure it's explosive. I'll just walk in and whap the Knife Juggler with my War Axe. It just doesn't really happen very often. And later on in the game, Snake Trap isn't really going to help us in the matchups that we're really trying to win. Now, there's something kind of valuable that you'd mentioned here as well about how, it will help a little bit against aggressive decks, but that's not really what we're targeting here. And I don't want to misrepresent this deck as the best deck in all of Hearthstone that beats everything that it plays against. Every deck has its weaknesses, right? And this deck it's not always particularly strong against other aggressive decks. Zoo, for example, or aggressive decks with lots of bubbles or things like that. So, I guess it's an interesting question of how many resources in the deck do you want to devote to an aggressive matchup versus actually doing the thing that makes this deck good and do its own thing better when it does hit its stride. And it seems like you've got some tools in here. You've got Juggler, Unleash. Those are tools that can help deal with aggressive decks. Stonetusk Boar, another one of those things that can help us deal with aggressive decks. But you haven't opted to put too many, niche tech cards in here, like Explosive Trap or anything like that. If we are facing aggressive metas, are there any cards in here that you think you would take out that maybe you would want to include something like Explosive in the deck?
Frankly, I like to min-max my decks and basically send the right deck into the ladder that I think is good against the current meta. And if I'm aiming for this deck to be good against anything non-aggro, then I don't really care about cards like Explosive Trap here. If I'm seeing aggro, then I'd rather just send Phase Hunter or send aggro Rogue or something like that.
Yeah. Another question we've got here is the choice of 2 Hunter's Mark, and I don't think we talked too much about this card yet. Why the choice to put in 2 Hunter's Marks rather than 1?
200 marks is absolutely core here. You really need this to make your starting Buzzard Unleash as powerful as it can possibly be. If you imagine like the handlock matchup, they play something like Molten Taunt. It's really hard for Hunter to get through that. And one of your only ways to do that is with Hunter's Mark. There are like plenty of uses for Hunter's Mark and the synergies with Boar and Unleash. Or even like with Bow Hunter's Mark. If you're on like turn 5, you want to play Tiger, but they also have a 4/6 up. You still just Hunter's Mark it, hit with your face, and then send a 5/5. Hunter's Mark is really one of the broken things inside this deck. It's really the way that Hunter is able to cheat out Tempo. So if you think of it, Druid can get 2 mana from Innervate or Wild Growth and just have mana for the whole game. Rogue can get 3 mana from Prep. Hunter's Mark, you're doing like 0 manage, deal 11 to like a Ysera, deal 9 to an Ancient of War, deal 5, right? That's essentially like a Prep spell damage Abyss. I think that it's really, really important to include Hunter's Mark here, and there's no way that I would ever cut it.
Yeah, I notice a lot of times when it gets to the point in the game where I'm playing my Buzzard out onto the board, whether it's turn 6, 7, something like that, oftentimes the number 1 card that I'm looking for when I play Buzzard Unleash and drop some Stonetusks is I'm looking for that Hunter's Mark there. And you bring up a good point. This costs 0. Eventually this card was nerfed. I think it costs 1 now, maybe 2. But having it be exactly 0 is important, right? Because you can do everything that you wanted to do on curve with a deck that loves to curve out, and you don't have to worry about investing a single card for 0 mana. On turn 5, you can use your Bow and play a Tiger. On turn 6, you can play the Highmane out and use that Hunter's Mark with whatever you have on the board. And you're able to continue tempoing the game, which is really what your opponent doesn't want to see, right?
Yeah, that's how you really snowball a game. When you can negate their 4, 5, 6 cost minion with 0 mana, and then develop your own 0 cost, it's the same as like a Prep Sap almost.
Right.
It's really broken, or right. It's not broken, but like it's really, really strong.
Yeah, and it works with other things too. There are Hail Mary plays that we have sometimes where we just play Juggler, and we Hunter's Mark something, and we just hope that it hits, right? But having it just cost nothing makes it such a flexible card. Now, we've also seen, there was an interesting situation we were playing over the shoulder a couple of weeks ago, and opponent plays Azure Drake, and we've got the Eaglehorn equipped, and we used Hunter's Mark to just deal basically 1 damage to that Azure Drake. And I just wanted to highlight how flexible this one can be, and also how we don't always have to get that super max value out of it, right? We don't have to Hunter's Mark a Ysera from 12 down to 1 in order to make sure that this card is doing its work. Sometimes it can be okay to just use a 0 mana card to do 1 damage, as long as we're getting something else out on the board at the same time.
Yeah, the point is you're negating their board and then playing something yourself. You want these tempo swings here.
Right.
Against Rogue specifically, Hunter's Mark doesn't get that much value because they don't play that many minions for you to really get big unleashes off of. 3 health and 4 health is basically all Rogue has. The only other consideration is something like Edwin, but they only have 1 Edwin, so you can kind of be liberal with using Hunter's Mark here.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Rogue, well, anybody that's played at the higher end of the ladder knows that there are a lot of Rogue players up there, right? How does this deck do against Rogue, do you feel?
Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted about this the more that I play it. Originally, when I first sent this deck on ladder, I was fairly positive. I was probably something like 60-40 against it. But then certain players, such as like Loke Shadow, completely body me when I play this deck against his Miracle Rogue. Certain other players, have easier times, it seems, than others. I think that against Rogue, you have a lot of the tools that you need to compete with it. but it's still kind of difficult to play against it. You have your bow, which lines up well against their 3-drops. You have your freezing trap, which is good against their Leeroy. You have your deadly shot, which can kill Auctioneer or Edwin or like some concealed cold blood minion. You have a lot of that, but you also end up taking damage yourself from using bow. You can't cheat out mana like using prep, and so when you play some of your removal, it also, you can't really develop your board as hard either, whereas Rogue can. And so I think that in that matchup, it might be, you might be favored against some of the weaker players, but against the stronger players who really understand the matchup and know what they're doing, you may be unfavored. I'm not entirely sure here. I might say this is something like 50-50, like at this point, depending on where in the ladder you are. Against like really elite miracles, it might be hard to play this deck, but it's not like you don't have options. You can definitely still win.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess mulligans here, like you would mulligan for Eaglehorn Bow specifically, River Crocolisk. I like to mulligan to hold Tiger as well, and on the play, I would also hold Boar and send Boar on turn 1. So the reasoning behind that is that for Rogue to deal with Boar, they would have to dagger it. And on their turn 1, they would have to coin dagger, which if they do that, you've sent 2 damage to them with Boar and made them use coin and use a charge. And I think that would be, more than happy. I'd be more than happy with that outcome. If they don't do it and they dagger on their turn 2, that means you've dealt 3 damage with Boar. And against this deck, against Miracle, in which you really need a lot of damage to them early on, 3 damage is non-trivial, and I'm happy with that outcome for a 1-drop.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they can also prep something on turn 1, but I don't see why they would. But generally, I just like to see them take 2 or 3 damage from this Boar.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't do this when I'm on the coin, though, because it only does 2 damage, and they don't need to, it's pretty natural for them to just clear it on their turn 2.
Right. Yeah. They don't have to invest really any resources if you play it when you have the coin. Exactly. Jungle Panther, another one that I think might be worth keeping as well, especially with a Houndmaster against Rogue. Normally, Houndmaster not really a card that we want to keep because we can't really guarantee that it's going to get value on 4. But if we do hold a Panther sometimes, do you think that it's okay to keep like Panther Houndmaster against Rogue?
Yes, probably. I think that's probably fine. Even if they play a 3-drop, then you can Houndmaster and either send face or trade. You usually can guarantee that you can get this Houndmaster off, unless they have something like Poison Flurry, or they're really trying to hate you and play like Thanos Prep Fan. In which case, I'm not even that sad if they do. Right? They've used a prep, and that's 1 less prep for like some stupid auctioneer turn later.
Right.
So yeah, I think that Panther is a fine keep as well.
Yeah, the stealth is nice. The rogue a lot of times will be happy to keep a reactionary hand. They'll say, okay, well, I got Gadget Zan, I'll eventually play the Gadget Zan out. But until then, they got their backstabs and SIs. They don't want to do nothing on their turn, right? So they may end up playing an SI without the combo just to play it onto the board, in which case we've already gotten some value out of that Stealth Panther and taking 2 to the face from the SI rather than taking 2 to our 4-2 there and having nothing on the board.
Yeah. One last card that I would keep here is Deadly Shot. I think that's rather self-explanatory. You want some answer to their auctioneer. You don't always get it, but when you do, it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Sometimes it's just nice to feel that sense of security that moving into turns 5 and 6 against the rogue, we do have a way to deal with them. And it gives us a more clear game plan as well. That if we already hold Deadly Shot, we know all we really need to do is just remove the minions that they play, right? Every single one of them. Don't let a single minion survive. And as long as we do that, Deadly Shot's inevitably going to get value against a rogue player. Another thing that can kind of make this matchup tough against rogue is that one of our really excellent mechanisms that we have for drawing cards or for just getting value in general is Buzzard Unleash. And rogues don't typically play enough minions on the board for us to get value out of this, nor do we really ever want to see a rogue that sticks a minion on the board, right? All of a sudden that thing's got cold blood and it's concealed. So we don't usually get to play that little like game of chicken that sometimes we get to play where opponent loads up the board, it's a race, and all of a sudden something like Buzzard Unleash. So yeah, not all of our tools as effective or universally effective as the rogues, unfortunately, in that matchup.
Yeah, with Buzzard, in this matchup in particular, I like to play it pretty liberally. It wouldn't be uncommon for me to play it on turn 3 with like a boar, Buzzard Boar, draw 1, send 1 damage to face. Especially if they already have like a deadly poison up from some other clear. Another thing you can do is like Buzzard, Hyena on turn 4. They have to deal with it a little bit carefully. I think that drawing 1 with Buzzard is generally just fine in this matchup. You're really not going to get much value out of it.
Yeah.
Likewise with Unleash, you're usually not going to play Unleash, to be honest. Like your max going to get like two Hounds out of it. If you're getting like 3 Hounds out of it, you probably lost anyways. So yeah, Unleash is not very helpful here.
Yeah, it's like 3 damage, basically replicating your hero power. Now there's another cool little thing here as well. Playing out 2 Scavenging Hyenas at the same time can be a little bit tricky. I noticed this is something that you had mentioned in the Discord channel. Explain that a little bit. Like on turn 4, let's say you drop the 2 Hyenas. It doesn't have to be against Rogue, against anybody, but it's a little trickier to deal with than we'd think, right?
But that is that it limits their removal options. Whereas normally they might be able to, do backstab SI against, your Juggler Hyena. They can't really do that. They would also have to, hit with their dagger and take 4 from that. So they have to remove it at the same time or do something like backstab Evis, which might be a little bit more awkward on their curve. Depending, it might force out a prep, something like that. But having double Hyenas is just more resilient and makes it, Druid can't just Keeper of the Grove,
right?
Because they're left with a 4/3 that'll trade face taunt up instead. I'm fond of double Hyena, or make it hard for the opponent to deal with in case of like making them decide whether to kill a Buzzard or Hyena. But otherwise, I would consider Hyena like a lower priority 2-drop as opposed to a Juggler, and just send it out there for like fodder, fodder for removal.
Right.
In the early game.
Yeah, although Hyena may die to a rogue's backstab, at the same time, that's a backstab that they don't get to play when they're using their gadgets in, right? Essentially, it's a 0 mana, draw 1 card. So sometimes it can be good, even against warriors or things, to just trot out cards like Hyena. They're not always going to get max value by playing Unleash the Hounds with a Hyena on a nice, big board. So it's okay. I think sometimes people struggle with this. They really want to get that big Hyena out there, but it's not so important really. It's just it's a 2-mana minion, and of course it has the potential to be gigantic, but most of the time, this is just like a high priority threat that gets dealt with first.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just a 2-drop. It's something that you can play in your curve, and if they don't deal with it, it has decent upside. Right. It can help you win aggro matchups too, if you get like a really sick Hyena Unleash, but that's a little bit less common.
Right. Yeah. Maybe another tiny little note here for our viewers. If you're going to play Hyena with Unleash the Hounds, be careful that sometimes it can be correct to play Unleash, trade a couple of the dogs, and then play Hyena, so that we stay out of BGH range. Having a 6/4 is still very useful. Having a Hyena that just gets BGH'd kind of eliminates the point of playing this combo in the first place. Alright, so how about
another nice thing is that with Hyena, if you have Buzzard Unleash and then you draw into Hyena, you can play it and like immediately buff it into like a fucking 6/4, 8/5 just from trading your Hounds in.
Yeah.
So that's another overlooked aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. You got 7 mana, takes 5 to play Buzzard Unleash, and if you happen to draw a Hyena in there, it can be really powerful. Okay, let's talk about a couple other matchups just briefly, and then we'll get into some games. Freeze Mage, who's favored there?
we basically smash Freeze Mage. You have everything that you need against them. You have the early minion pressure, which forces them to not spend their mana on drawing and on some removal instead. You have a lot of reach with your kill commands, your hero power, and Leeroy. You can often just set them to 1 on like turn 7, and then it's really hard for them to do anything. They usually just concede there. You have removal in form of Hunter's Mark and Deadly Shot for their Doomsayer. You have Unleash the Hounds against their 0-2 mirror images. Basically, everything is going for you in this matchup, and you really shouldn't have any trouble. Like, I don't think that you need Flair to win this matchup. You just smash them anyways. Last season, I went like 8-0 against Mage. Like, it's not even close, in my opinion.
Yeah, and not to mention, the Highmane. You can only freeze this thing so many times, and to add insult to injury, the thing has 5 HP. It's out of flame strike range. Even if they do manage to kill it, the hyenas are a pain in the ass for them to deal with. So, yeah, just all around has a lot of great tools for dealing with Freeze Mage. How about Shaman? Now, there are a couple of variants of Shaman. There's the more aggressive variant, the slow mid-range version. What's our game plan against that? What do we want to keep in our opening hand? Are we favored? Are we the aggressor? Walk me through that.
Yeah, I feel like with Shaman, you're maybe slightly favored here. Shaman is often slower than other decks, and so you have more time to be able to set up your board, set up Bow, and then actually play Unleash the Hounds with Buzzard or Juggler. The things that I would look for in this matchup are your early game curve, having 2/2 drops if you're on the coin, 2 or 3 if you're on the play. Bow is really good against your Feral Spirits. Houndmaster maybe if you already have a good curve, but I would also definitely keep Unleash and Juggler for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Buzzard. I might not necessarily always keep Buzzard. In this matchup against Midrange in particular, you also want to be cautious of Hex against Highmane. That's one way that you can kind of lose the game. You might rather just play like a 3 or 4 drop instead, and hero power instead of playing Highmane, unless you've baited it like a Hex out already from like a big Hyena or something.
Right.
But I think that with your removal with Bow, your Unleash the Hounds, your Juggler, and Buzzard value, you should be slightly favored, I think.
Yeah, and Shaman, especially the mid-range variant, they do totem fairly frequently, or at least that's part of their normal game plan. And lacking a lot of explosive card draw as a Shaman player, they're likely to want to be filling in the gaps in their curve by just toteming. And totems are slow, right? They're 0 attack most of the time. So they almost can't help themselves from setting up a good unleash for us here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's
even against like aggro Shaman, I think that you have enough early board presence that you just beat them there, and then they have to spend removal to kill your own threats, so they're not sending that to face. And once they're kind of out of their removal, then you just board pressure them and they die. It's not like some other decks where like they really outboard you, and you really have nothing that you can do about it.
Right. Like, some of their removal options, like, for example, Earth Shock doesn't actually line up that great against this mid-range deck. Not a lot of, sticky little minions that we're playing. Most of our minions have a little bit more HP. Maybe susceptible to Lightning Bolt, but again, if you're playing Lightning Bolt early on in the game as the Shaman, you're locking yourself out of potentially 33% or 25% of your mana crystals on the next turn, which is significant for those aggro variants. I would say Unleash the Hounds, just really the great equalizer against Shaman in my experience. Okay, so let's move on to some more aggressive decks. Really, 2 types of aggressive decks in Classic. There's the sort of zooey board control-y decks that do most of their damage through just hitting you in the face with minions, and then there are the more burn-oriented decks where, like Face Hunter, where you deal a decent amount of damage to face with creatures and then kind of finish it off with like Arcane Shot and some of the other burn spells like Kill Command. So let's start with the kind of zooey decks that are really board-centric. How do we do against those?
Yeah, this is not the deck for those. You're pretty unfavored in those cases. Most notably, your Zoo Warlock and your Aggro Paladin. The matchup is pretty abysmal, and the only way that you really win these is with Juggler Unleash. And so when you're mulliganing, you really want to mulligan pretty hard just for that, and like maybe River Croc to not like immediately die and have some trade potential. In those cases, you really want to save those resources, Juggler Unleash, for turn 4 or turn 5. You can actually play it. And I think that you really want to try not to play it on like turn 3 or 4 if you can. I think that people kind of get scared, excessively scared against the pressure that they're facing, and they kind of stall themselves from dying earlier, but like it doesn't really win them the game at all. It doesn't help them win the game.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, is that if we're playing Unleash the Hounds on 3, just raw Unleash, it's not going to do a great job at doing anything but kind of delay the inevitable for us, right? It's not like we have another way to get back into the game after we play Unleash the Hounds. So important to keep Knife Juggler and Unleash. Bow is another consideration in some of those Zoo matchups. How do you feel about keeping the bow?
I have a point about the Unleash first. So if you basically are on turn 3, they played their turn 3 stuff and then you play Unleash, you clear their board, okay, and then they play their turn 4 and they have a board again. And like, what do you do about it?
Right.
The way that you really win against aggro is that you stabilize your board and like maintain the initiative yourself, such that you can continue trading on your turns, and you know they're not doing it for you and hitting your face.
Right.
So the way you do that is with Juggler Unleash or Buzzard Unleash with like a Sick Hunter's Mark or something.
Right.
But yeah, as for like bow, I think that bow is okay as a temporary band-aid to stop some of the bleeding. But you still really need to have Juggler Unleash. Like you can kill 2 minions with this thing, but that's only like 2 of their like 1 or 2 health minions, and you're taking damage as well. And so it's not the most conducive to really winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Cards like Kill Command probably out of the question. Removing like a Flame Imp or something with a Kill Command isn't really what we're trying to do with this deck. What about Stonetusk Boar? Is that something you'd keep against aggro or not?
Probably would keep it against aggro. It's just like some ping that stops the bleeding early. You can go a 2-1 hopefully, and you're pretty happy. On the point with bow as well, I think that bow is helpful in terms of facilitating your Unleash, because it can help kill your Void Walkers, which are 1/3, or your other things which may have 3 health, and you'd rather your Juggles to not hit those. So it's just to soften up their board a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think being able to play the bow on turn 3 or turn 4, and then transitioning into Juggler Unleash, where we can also use our bow to help clear that the same turn we're playing Juggler Unleash. Yeah, I really like having the bow already equipped. But like you say, it's not going to win the game by itself. It's almost always going to be the Juggler Unleash. It's not the bow that wins the game. The bow just kind of synergizes with those and helps us out a little bit.
The early game, you really just want to not die. So
right.
Just sending a freezing trap in, sending a deadly shot in, like you might just need to do that to kill something and prolong the damage, right. Or like reduce the damage.
Yeah, and it's not like Face Hunter where we can kind of bait the early turns and then play like Explosive into Explosive or Explosive into Juggler Unleash. We're not running Explosive Trap, so we don't really have the option with this deck to just be hero powering and sitting back, kind of playing coy. We don't really have a lot of turnarounds other than Juggler Unleash, so like you say, being proactive. If you have a deadly shot in hand, don't save this thing for a Doomguard to come out, because when the Doomguard does come out, if you're trying to play deadly shot, then they'll probably have plenty of other minions that thing can hit, right? So yeah, being sometimes players really want to get the maximum amount of value out of cards like Hunter's Mark, Deadly Shot, but when we're facing aggressive decks, hey, sometimes you just gotta throw out any resources you can just to not die and make it to the part of the game where maybe we can get a Juggler Unleash or Buzzard Unleash.
Yeah, like as a general concept against aggressive decks, what you're looking for as the other side to it is that you're not trying to play for value. You're trying to play for tempo. And tempo is either building your own board or removing their board. So you want to do whatever it takes to do either, like to maximize either of those. So you don't really want to play for value. You just want to send cards, even if it's like mana inefficient, or just you could get like there's opportunity cost, but you still need to play it earlier.
Yeah. Now there are a couple other matchups we can discuss here, but we were planning to show folks some games here tonight. So what do you say? You want to queue up and play a couple of games with this? Show the fans how it's done.
Yeah, we can do that. I think it's also worth briefly discussing the Druid matchup.
Oh, yeah.
In the Druid matchup, I would say that you are also quite favored. Probably at least 60-40, 65, like 65-35, at least from my experience. Generally, what you would want is your early 2-drops, most notably River Crocolisk, Savannah Highmane, and I also like to keep at least one of Hunter's Mark, Freezing Trap, or Deadly Shot. You know, you hate those games where you just get like Coin Innervate Yeti or some crap like that, and having one of these is one way that you can help stop that. Not to mention, they'll generally always get some amount of value just due to the nature of Druid playing like one big minion at a time each turn. And so you shouldn't have any difficulty finding a good opportunity to play these.
Yeah.
Another consideration, or like rather one way to lose the game, is, you know, if you play Juggler or Hyena on turn 2, and then they just freaking innervate Keeper of Grove. If they kept a lot of cards, I would say that I might often just like Hero Power instead, to not allow them this opportunity. Like playing against something like that is just so game losing that you might not want to risk it instead.
Yeah, I having seen Innervate Keeper of the Grove numerous times with this deck. You know, there are two kind of schools of thought as we're going into turn 2. The first one is I'm playing a deck that curves out hard, right? So I want to play my Juggler, I want to play my Hyena. It feels bad not to be dropping a minion on the board. But the flip side of that coin is exactly like you mentioned, is if we play one of these decent cards, you know, Juggler or Hyena, and they innervate out the Keeper, how do we deal with the 2/4? We're on 3 mana. We don't really want to. That's not really the minion we want. A Deadly Shot. Hunter's Mark maybe, but it's going to require us to invest another resource into it. Eaglehorn Bow doesn't line up properly. Jungle Panther is not going to trade favorably into the 2/4, or you know we're going to end up getting 2-for-1. So yeah, there are not a lot of great resources to deal with that early innervated Keeper. So I like what you're saying there. Keep the Croc, which is fine. Then they're going to have to use at least Wrath to clear that. But maybe don't feel too compelled to drop these 2 health minions so early in the game. You mentioned keeping Highmane against Druid. Definitely can be a frustrating card for Druids to deal with, the Highmane. How do you feel about keeping the Tiger?
I don't think it's as good. I personally probably wouldn't keep it. Like maybe I'll keep it if I have an okay curve on the play. But 5/5 doesn't really help you against like their 4/6, and Highmane does. And so that's why I prefer keeping Highmane. It's just a lot more difficult for them to clear Highmane. And then deal with the 2/2s as well. Because with the 2/2s you can also Houndmaster that, get a Hunter's Mark on like their Ancient of War or whatever. Highmane is just so much more value, and I don't think that Tiger is as game-winning as Highmane is.
Yeah, absolutely. This card really powerful against Druid, and like we'd mentioned earlier, there's synergy there as well with Hyena and Buzzard, where if they leave the Highmane on the board, even if they just silence it and leave it on the board, we've got some options, right? If it dies, we get Scavenging Hyena. If it dies and triggers the Death Rattle, then Starving Buzzard's going to draw us 2 cards off the Highmane, slamming into something. So, yeah, definitely that 6/5 body, tough to deal with. The 2/2/2s that come out at the end, also not really lining up with the type of removal that Druid normally plays. Double Keeper of the Grove is highly unlikely that they're going to play that. They would have keepered this before. You've got Spell Power Swipe, but that's usually 9 mana if they're playing Drake Swipe. So yeah, all in all, Highmane, very good card against Druid, I would have to agree. I do want to remind everybody just one more time what you were saying about Freezing Trap, Deadly Shot, and Hunter's Mark, to keep one of these. Just make sure that early innervated whatever it is that's a pain in the ass does not end up just taking the game away, right? So if it's an innervated Yeti, sure, Freezing Trap is fine. Anything that's innervated, Deadly Shot is always going to do well against it.
Yeah, going back to the point about Buzzard as well, similar to Warrior, you also often need to have some amount of card draw to get you enough gas to finish the game. I wouldn't necessarily keep Buzzard, but it's something that you are often looking for. So in the mid game, you might want to take Buzzard as opposed to like a Houndmaster, for example. Especially if you already have Unleash in hand. Like you'll often get to the point in like turn 7 where you're just kind of dry.
Right, right. Yeah, we will run out of resources with this deck, like you say. It's not an infinite value machine, and we only have one way to draw cards, which is through the Starving Buzzard. So we do need to deploy our resources properly, and also recognize that as the game continues to go on, yeah, Starving Buzzard starts to become a really important card. Another consideration, and just a general thing to note about this deck, is the Stonetusk Boar. Sometimes we might feel compelled to play the Stonetusk Boar because we got 1 extra mana left over on like turn 5 or 4 or something like that. Now, in my experience, I usually keep the Boar as a way to trigger Hunter's Mark or as additional fuel for the Buzzard. Is that something you agree with, or would you just send the Boar out whenever you got the mana for it?
Are you talking about keeping the Boar in the Mulligan?
No, I'm saying like we've got the Boar in our hand at some point.
Oh yeah, I would probably keep it. Yeah, I would probably keep it because the 1 damage is not significant to lethaling the opponent later in almost all cases, and you'd rather use it for Hunter's Mark or for Buzzard, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep in mind, Stonetusk Boar, not just something that we trot out there whenever we feel like it. Stonetusk Boar has great synergy with Buzzard, with Hunter's Mark, and actually with Scavenging Hyena also. Just being able to play Stonetusk Boar, Hunter's Mark, and a Hyena in the same turn, that's a 4/3 on the board, and potentially, getting to kill something that's a little bit bigger too.
Yeah.
Any other matchups that you think are worth mentioning?
Not in particular. I guess Handlock is similar to Freeze Mage in my opinion. You have everything that you need from the early game pressure. You have the deadly shots for the Twilight Drake or Giant on 4. You have Buzzard Unleash into Hunter's Mark to kill their giants, and you have a lot of bursts to finish them at the end. You often want to try to just build up a good board by the time they're at like 14-ish health, and not necessarily push them over unless you have burst. And you can pretty reliably do that at times, but generally speaking, you should smash this matchup.
Yeah.
I think as a final note, in terms of like summarizing the deck strengths and weaknesses, 1, you're really weak to aggro, so don't try to cue this into like Zubat meta. That's not the intention. You're strong against like slower decks, maybe except for like Miracle Rogue, in which you're like kind of 50-50, depending on the rogue player maybe, and how familiar they are with the deck. But generally what I like to do is queue this list into Freeze Mage, Handlock, Druid, and Warrior. If I'm facing other things in the meta, then I would prefer to like send something else.
Yeah.
But that's my specific target.
Yeah,
with this deck.
Absolutely, yeah. It does fantastic against slower decks, has a lot of stuff that's difficult to remove, either by virtue of having 5 HP, or by, just the clean, nice removal that we've got in the Deadly Shot, the Freezing Trap, and the Hunter's Marks. Just a lot of really, difficult things for those control-y decks to deal with. Alright, so what do you say? You want to give it a shot?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alright, awesome. Let's see if I think I have to wait for you to start. Alright,
yeah,
so...
let me get into Klein again.
Cool. And I'll copy this deck code for anybody that's watching. I'm sure everybody here has probably already seen this deck before. But if you don't have the deck code already, there it is in the chat. You can take a look. We'll also post this in the VOD. We'll also post this in the Discord server, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to snag that list. One thing to note, for those of you who are going to give this a shot, is that this Jungle Panther is a little different from the original list. The original list had Animal Companion in it, so if you're playing that, try it with the Panther. See how that works for you. Otherwise, we'll play a couple of games here. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're on the East Coast. It's already almost midnight there. But we'll play a couple of games. Check it out. As Phazure mentioned, of course, sometimes, it's rough queuing this into aggressive decks. So let's hope we get like a warrior or rogue or something interesting here.
Yeah, the hope is that we target Handlock, Freeze Mage, Warrior, and Druid. But I was playing this earlier today, and that was not necessarily the meta. So we'll see what they have.
Yeah. Let's see who else is on that's playing right now. I don't see too many people at the top of the ladder that are playing, so I'll wish you the best of luck in finding the correct opponent to play against. Maybe a lot of Druids on. I don't have the Druids on my friend list.
Hopefully.
They don't deserve.
Yeah, fair warning, it might take like 5 minutes to queue into a game.
Yeah, that's the weight of the crown, right?
Rank 2 now, sadly.
Yeah, we've had a couple of really competitive seasons here. It's been, I think it's really exciting because there are new names that are popping up. People that are like high level standard and wild players are coming in playing classic, and also just the sheer number of games required. I think you were saying it was like 850 one season to take rank 1 or to keep rank 1 by the end of the season. So yeah, really a competitive arena here on at least the NA ladder. I assume that the EU ladder is the same way. There are a lot of new faces coming on and a lot of new bots that are
Great game, by the way.
Awesome. Okay, let's take a look at this.
Alright, so going into this, Tiger, Houndmaster, Buzzard, Boar against what I believe is a Handlock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to toss all of these. These are not what we really need.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, should have the updated list on there. Perfect.
Buzzard Unleash is okay here. Highmane is pretty solid. We'll play Panther on 3. Probably Hero Power on 2. Boar's not terrible, but you can also just use it later. I'd prefer to save it here.
Yeah, I like keeping the Boar resource with the Buzzard. You got the Buzzard in hand already, so we know that at some point it gets some value. Oh, a little bit of a surprise there with Thalnos coming out.
I don't care about that. We're going to Hero Power.
I like it. Yeah, 1 damage per turn, not exactly representing an enormous threat to us. I don't think we're terribly scared of any kind of spells that have spell damage either.
I mean, the only thing that he can do is like Hellfire, but 1 spell damage on that does not matter.
Yeah.
So who are we just play on curve?
Yeah, Hellfire, Shadow Flame, both would be able to kill this 4-2, but really not, not a helpful thing to do. Alright, so now here, how are you thinking that you're going to use the coin? Do you want to coin this Highmane, or would you rather get on the board with the Tiger first?
Actually an interesting play. One consideration is actually like doing Leeroy Coin Boar, because it sets up for a really nice Buzzard Unleash the next turn. Another option here, he has 6 cards. I don't think he can Giant next turn. I could also just coin Tiger, leave the Panther stealth, or I could send it face.
There might be some concern about a spell damage Mortal Coil if you unstealth this Panther here.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with Tigering here.
Yeah, I like the Tiger play, and we have a
I mean, what is he gonna play on turn 5? Like fucking Earthen Ring or something?
Argus maybe.
I think I'm gonna Tiger and keep it stealth. Next turn, maybe we do something like Boar Jenkins on Drake. Maybe Earthens, I'll probably trade 4-2. If he does Faceless, might be a little bit annoying. Faceless, I'll probably still be a little bit greedy with the Unleash, because I can also do Buzzard Unleash Boar on turn 6.
Right.
Interesting.
Alright, well, Shadow Flame does clear
Alright,
your
well,
stuff.
here I think I'm probably going to just boar Houndmaster.
Yeah, and this is one of those plays that we were talking about earlier.
DC.
Yeah, just the nice, you know, the ability to play this boar plus Houndmaster on 5 is quite strong, you know. That's 7/6 worth of stats for 5. I think we might have lost your audio there again. I know it's probably difficult to handle talking through the deck, playing the deck at such a high level, all at the same time. I wish I could play your cards for you.
Yeah, I DC'd again. I'm trying to get back. Fuck me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sure we've all been there. There are worse situations to DC in, I'm sure.
Honestly, it's not even lost yet because we have Unleash and Buzzard.
Mm-hmm.
I intended to Houndmaster this and trade the 1/1. Like, then we have a dominant position, but next turn I could probably also just Highmane.
Yeah.
And then save Buzzard, Hounds. Like, this is not unplayable, frankly.
Yeah, and, you know, I gotta say, the Thalnos on the board, to me, you know, it seems like it might have been a premature choice by your opponent there. Because it just gives you, you know, gives you the fuel that you want for Buzzard Unleash.
2-1-2-3. Deal with the 6-5.
Yeah, I like that, lining up with this Ancient Watcher here. Soulfire? That's going to be Immortal Coil, I think. Still not the worst, you know, having playing against a handlock that doesn't have an opportunity to tap too much early in the game here. Alright, is this our Buzzard turn, or are you considering maybe, like, something else, Kill Command? And while we're waiting for our friend Phazure to reconnect here, I'll make sure to launch some of these rocks that I've got here out of our catapult. I would assume that normally here we'd probably want to play Buzzard, Unleash, maybe the Croc with it, since we've already got the Buzzard on the board. Probably digging here for Hunter's Mark, I would think. Yeah, probably Hunter's Mark. Hunter's Mark very strong, and you know, anytime you're playing handlock, you'd like to see that card. That's an interesting play too.
This is not really threatening enough yet. 4-6-2-1 doesn't trade the best into 4-5.
Right. And, you know, the other
next
thing
turn
is,
we have like Buzzard, Unleash, Kill Command,
yeah,
or probably draw into Hunter's Mark and like Hyena or something.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think that one thing that's important to note here is that you're not too scared of them getting a little bit of value here, right? You know, value trading into you.
Not really. Let's see. I think we probably have to do it now. We don't have many other plays. Can we Leeroy?
Yeah, I was going to say the Leeroy is a possibility here. You know,
Leeroy next turn with on turn 9 is okay, but like maybe I think we just go for it.
Sure, we've got good chances at Hunter's Mark here. Hyena's not the worst card to get it either.
Alright, so we're one off from being able to clear the giant. Oh my god, I'm fucking DCing again. Alright, reconnected.
little awkward to clear the giant, I suppose. Maybe kill command? Yeah. Yeah, and this creates a little bit of an awkward situation for the handlock here as well, right? Where your Houndmaster, it's not ideal for them to run the giant into the Houndmaster. Also, definitely not ideal for them to run the giant into the Buzzard. So I'm going to opt to clear with Hellfire. Alright, what are you thinking about here?
Yeah, it's pretty rough here. I might YOLO Deadly Shot that 8-5 at this point.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, Unleash isn't going to help us here. I don't have anything to really go with it.
Yeah, I would probably pray for that and then like Highmane.
Hey!
Oh my god.
Nice shot. Nice shot. For those of you interested in getting rank 1 on the ladder, you just saw how it's done. But, you know, the jokes aside, it is sometimes the thing that we need to do when we're playing games is like identify if something like, you know, a YOLO Deadly Shot is correct, and I like your choice there. Nothing else that we have really lines up with the board.
Yeah, unfortunate that we didn't pick up Hunter's Mark before.
Right, right. Now it's going to be pretty tricky. I think we need like a Buzzard into Unleash into Hunter's Mark. Not our greatest help here. Second bow.
We'll be tracking here. Kill command.
I think it's gotta be.
Probably take kill command and then what? Kill command 4-5. Houndmaster into kill giant.
Yeah, I can even play the hyena with it if we want.
Be kill command here.
Is there
And hope I.
Is there any consideration of holding kill command for another, or trading the 6-5 into the 4-5 and using kill command on something else? Oh no, the rope is burning. Just imagine how much worse this would be if we had no Stormu on the board. Alrighty, GG. A little rough having the connection problems. Obviously, nobody wants to be in that situation. We all understand what it's like not being able to connect to the game or keep a consistent connection. But that's alright. That's alright. We'll see if we can get Phazure back here, maybe for one more. Although I would be reticent to force someone to play Hearthstone if they're having trouble connecting.
Am I back, man?
Now I can hear you. Now I can hear you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not my usual setup, so my connection is kind of ass.
Hey, that's
Fortunate.
not. Yeah, no problem at all. I tell you what. Do you want to play a game over the shoulder on my account, even though I'm down in the Mega Plub range?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, cool. We'll try one. I've got the golden version of this deck anyway, so we can be all fancy. Plus, I get warrior bots all the time, right? So it's nice and instructive. One off of the really important rank here. I know that everybody is trying to get this rank. Maybe we can lose a game here and drop a rank.
Yeah, that game probably should have been winnable. He would probably have to Hellfire the 4-3 and 3-2 board that we built on turn 5.
Right,
And then we still have initiative to play Highmane on turn 6.
right.
So this should be winnable.
All right, 68 against 68. What do we keep here? I have a sneaking suspicion this one will be a mirror.
Yeah, basically you should probably toss everything. 4-5-3 is not what you want.
Yeah. And what are we looking for here?
Early game, Croc, Juggler, I guess. Maybe maybe Boar, probably not. Tracking is playable on 1. You don't have anything else. You probably look for 2 in this case.
You think tracking here?
Yeah, probably.
All right, let's give it a shot. Why not? How do you feel? We already got a high.
It would depend on what he's playing, but if you think he's mid-range, then Trap is the way. Otherwise, Hounds, I guess. But in this case, maybe Trap.
I'm gonna go with the trap. I have a feeling that this might be a mid-range hunter that we're facing here. And there you go.
Yeah.
All right. You feel like the hyena's the play here? Also have just the opportunity to hero power if we want. I think playing a little bit more proactively, lining up with the board is probably the sensible decision.
Hyena is fine here.
Alright, hyena it is. I'm not too sad to see the bow here. Second hyena in hand. How do you feel about just equipping the bow, maybe swinging into the 1-1, maybe just keeping the bow equipped? What are you thinking?
So if he had coin, you would definitely kill the 1-1 because of Houndmaster.
Right.
Turn 3, he would probably like Companion instead. But I think you definitely have to bow here. Hyena doesn't achieve anything.
Right.
Next turn, he probably plays Animal Companion. Animal Companion, you probably freezing trap that, and maybe Hyena, and you don't want to get your board freezing trapped, so you probably kill the board here.
Yeah, I like that. I like that line of reasoning. You know, we don't always have the opportunity to perfectly do 3 damage with Eaglehorn and get the max value out of it. But yeah, I agree with you. In this situation, we'd much rather be playing freezing. Now, do you feel like we want to also play the hyena with this as well? Kind of exhaust that last... Well, it won't actually exhaust the bow charge because the bow will gain durability from freezing trap. How would you go about this here? It seems dangerous for us to swing into this 4-2 on the board here. I would be inclined to play freezing and maybe just let the... I don't know if we let the hyena go. Let's say we play the trap. This weapon will be buffed up. Well, we have a good curve coming down the next couple of turns. I think with Phazure still figuring out his connection here, I'm going to play the hyena onto the board. It's not my favorite play. In fact, I think maybe it was correct to steady shot here, keep the hyena for a little bit later. But tough decision. Also worth mentioning that in the mirror, we almost always want to get Eaglehorn Bow, not just in the mirror of, mid-range versus mid-range hunter, but just in general, really want to have Eaglehorn Bow because it can trigger off of opponent's secrets as well. Alright. Derp going hard with the 5-mana Huffer here. I feel like in order to survive, we most likely are going to have to trade this with the 5/5.
Alright, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yeah. Welcome back.
Alright, so what happened? Freezing Trap on what?
Freezing Trap triggered on Huffer, then Huffer was just replayed for 5 here.
Okay. Yeah, you don't want to be taking damage here, so you probably just drop Highmane, trade with the 5/5.
That's what I was thinking as well. Yeah, we're a little too low to be face tanking at this point. Would you ever consider swinging with the bow there on the chance that we would get a second bow? At this point, it seems unlikely that we'll be using our face to clear anything else for the rest of the game.
I think you need that because even if you draw a bow, you still play like Tiger, Hero Power, or Kill Command next turn.
Yeah. So maybe next turn we can use the last charge on this and anticipate that if we draw a bow on the next one, we can play it. Okay.
So he's trying to race you hard right here. What does he have? Probably Kill Command in hand?
That seems sensible, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do anything about it if he has it, so you basically trade your ones into 6/2. Or do you have lethal? 14, 15, 16, 21, 23? No. So I would probably just Tiger.
You Tiger instead of Kill Command?
KC face? Your own face?
I'm not.
There is a chance, but yeah, he probably has Unleash or something.
Right.
But you still have to kill the 6/2 and send face with everything.
Yeah, I think that Unleash kills us no matter what. So
yeah,
we do it this way. I suppose there is even a consideration there to Hunter's Mark that and get that 1 extra damage in, but I suppose at this point it doesn't really matter too much.
Oh really? He does not have it?
Interesting. Oh, there it is.
Oh, of course, just top.
Yeah, he's going to get an earful from me about that.
Huh.
Alright, so far so good. What do you say? You want to try one more?
My side or your side?
Let's do it on mine. I don't want to make you lose ranks if you're playing on a setup that doesn't have a good connection. That doesn't seem very friendly or fair.
Nah. Losses are whatever, just go back up.
Yeah. It's nice to have like accurate metrics as well. There are losses that you can learn from, and there are losses that, the only thing you learn is that modern technology needs to be a little bit more reliable.
Yeah. This guy usually plays rogue.
Yeah.
So mage, hopefully it's freeze mage, for which, I mean, I don't know if you really care enough for Boar. Like, he could also just coin hero power it. I would probably rather draw your bigger minions, your 2 drops, 3 drops.
Right.
So I'd toss off.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Rather have a Croc, rather have Tiger, Highmane, Panther, things like that. Hey, you buddy.
You have an answer to Doomsayer here. You just send Juggler on 2. See what you draw.
We've got Deadly Shot, we've got Hunter's Mark, we got some ways to deal.
Highmane is okay later.
Yeah. Yeah, Highmane really tough for freeze mages to deal with.
Crossbow. Top that Panther.
I wish. Now, how do you feel about hero powering here? Would you rather hero power or play the Hyena?
I would probably Hyena in the case that you draw Houndmaster or another 2 drop. Right. I think you would just want to maximize your pressure early on.
Yeah. Yeah, get something developed on the board. Can't disagree with you there. Okay.
Yeah, so now you cash in that 2 damage anyways.
Right.
And Buzzard, I don't know if, you could play Buzzard, but
it seems a little risky.
it makes his turns more awkward. He would probably want to hero power it, and it buffs your 2/2. What else did they do on turn 4? Like, Secret? Kind of Pain? If they act like...
I think we're in good shape against an Acolyte. Or Loot Hoarder or any other minions that are coming down. You know what, why don't we give it a shot? Let's try the Buzzard. See how it goes. Kind of playing off the synergy of getting this Hyena on the board so early on. Alright, nothing unexpected there. Turn too late. Well, the sensible thing would probably be to play this Boar. You know, the only other time this thing's going to come in useful is maybe at the end of the game. We have some Boar, Hunter's Mark on Alexstrasza, but we're not really thinking that far ahead right now. I think the reasonable play is just to play Boar, Hero Power, trade. And there we go. Nice 6 damage swing. Next turn we're in a good position to play Highmane. With 5 mana here, not a lot of good ways to deal with this. You know, Fireball's taking up the entire turn. Not really anything fantastic to coin out.
We end up buzzarding on turn 4.
We did.
Nice.
The Buzzard got pinged and a Loot Hoarder was played. We got to follow it up with Stonetusk Boar trading.
Yeah, sounds good. So that could be Vaporize. Is he gonna mirror image? No. Here I would probably Juggler Hyena.
Yes.
If that's Vaporize, so be it. It also spawns more knives. Flame Strike, like, I don't really care. You're still gonna have minion presence later. You have a kill command in hand. You're kind of close.
Right.
So.
Yeah, my thought would be Vaporize. We want to at least get some value out of this guy dying.
Yeah.
Okay. Just an Ice Barrier.
Alright.
And this feels like a pretty strong position going into turn 7 here.
Yeah.
Blizzard seems like the most likely play here. Just finding a way to freeze this Highmane. Sometimes it's better to just freeze the Highmane than it is to actually deal with it and kill it, because when it dies, even if we didn't have this Hyena on the board, when this Highmane dies, the additional 2/2 Hyenas are going to be a pain in the ass. So, expecting to see Blizzard, but we'll see.
Yeah, so Frost Nova, Doomsayer, Wheel Deadly.
Right.
Here, I would probably just like Hero Power. Maybe you could kill command, but I don't feel the need to extend Croc onto the board. Is there any breaking point we care about? We're looking at 11 on the board. You have kill command, setting him to 15. I don't think is that relevant. So I'd probably hold the Buzzard, hold the Croc.
Yeah.
Kill command, I don't feel like you really have to show it yet. So, yeah, I'm a fan of just leaving it like so.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. I think that in my naive mind, I probably would have played the kill command here on the face. But really, with the coin in hand, Alex available, like, it seems like a card that we don't need to play quite yet.
So here he wants an image.
Yeah. Maybe a Frost Lance. Yep, Ice Lance, whatever it's called. Not the worst outcome.
Deadly that. Deadly that. Okay.
What do you say? You want to go for the 1 and 3 on Deadly Shot? Make it a game?
Oh yeah, 100%. But maybe we'll play it safer once.
Alright. So Deadly Shot. I don't really feel a sense of urgency here to play the kill commands out, but maybe there is. What do you think? If this gets frozen again,
Mm,
we may have a little bit more difficulty popping the block.
I think this time you do actually do it because on the chance that you top deck bow and that's block, you can bow kill command and that's 8 and then hero power and he would be at 9, so that's a perfect 1 for the block. Otherwise you don't have mana to hero power as well next turn. So in
Right,
this case you do it.
right, yeah. We'd have 9 mana worth of cards that we want to play. And yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, so right now he maybe wants to like Alex or something.
It might even Alex us. Yeah, Alex us and use these fireballs. If is an additional ice block sitting there, then maybe we're in a little bit of trouble. I think we're still doing fine though.
Yeah, okay, we're definitely doing fine here. I really hope that we can get a bow or something though.
Right. Yeah, Bow also, I would say, is the most important card in this matchup, just because they're going to play a lot of secrets, right? Um, so we're talking 3 mana that we pay for the Bow, base 6 damage that we get from it, increasing to 9 or 12. It's a lot of damage. Okay. Do you feel like committing the Houndmaster here to get maybe the Highmane out of Flame Strike range, or is that just a waste?
I think that having the Flame Strike kill Hymen is better in this case, so I'd probably proc Houndmaster hero power.
You're saying Houndmaster the Croc?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Are you in any world
because
concerned where we don't have an activator for kill command on our next turn?
no, because we have Hymen up and it'll drop 2/2s.
Right, right. Okay.
And you have a lot of top deck beasts, so I feel like this is okay.
Right, right.
Yeah, the only thing is we're sad if he Alexes. Otherwise, we should be fine.
Well, given that it wasn't in the hand last turn, would have had to have
Yeah,
picked it up before.
3 cards. He drew 3 cards since then from AI, and then this last card.
Right.
But then he needs to have exactly Frostbolt, Fireball, 2 of which we know are in his hand.
Right.
He used 1 bolt on turn 1.
Yeah, and an Ice Lance already out as well.
How many cards are in his deck?
10 cards left in the deck, 10 cards in hand.
Alright, this is fine. Now he's really behind.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, I think you just, oh, you can bow. Okay, so he has 15 with Ice Block. No, sorry, with Ice Barrier. You have 4, 6, 8, 11, 13.
Well, we can
I think-
pop the block
I think-
without even attacking, right? I mean, we can
Yeah.
attack too. It really doesn't matter. This is 8 damage on the board, so that just cancels out the barrier. So I feel like, yeah, really kind of doesn't really matter. Just in case it's vape, I think we want to attack with this little dude first. Alright. Nothing terribly unexpected there. So
Yes,
let's
so I
see.
guess you kill command hero power.
Yeah.
So if he Alexes himself, you don't necessarily have lethal yet.
Right. We got, let's see, 8, 11, 12, 13. Yeah. That said, you know, being able to Hunter's Mark the Alex, we're not really in like immediate danger there as well.
Yeah, given that he never Alexed you, that was a winning game there.
Right, right.
One last one?
Yeah,
people want?
yeah. Let's play one more for the road. That sounds like a fun time. I have to admit this is maybe my favorite Hearthstone deck of all time. There's something that I just love. I love the beasts, all the furry animals that we get in this deck aesthetically. Also, you know, interesting because I think it's the only viable tribal deck in all of Classic. Pirates, not really a thing. Maybe some kind of fringe Murloc decks, but As far as like consistently good decks go, this one I think is the only tribal deck.
Yeah. Dissing Murloc Zoo? Face Zoo?
I wanna play Murloc Zoo. I really do. I really do. It's an interesting.
Man. And I would play that. It's a face deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alright, so we have a Druid here.
So do you think? How do you feel about keeping the Hyena?
So we definitely ditched the kill command. We definitely would keep the Panther, I believe. The Hyena is debatable. Basically, what we're fearing is Innervate into Keeper.
Right.
Hyena really is not so game winning, in my opinion, and so I would rather probably toss it and search for Croc or Highmane.
Yeah, I like that. I like that as well. I like, yeah, finding the Highmane, maybe the Tiger, but yeah, mostly just this guy.
Druid is slow enough such that you're not so sad if you miss a 2.
Right.
And you also have 2 chances to draw into it anyways.
Right.
You're not going to play Buzzard like that, but okay, well, I guess we could play Hyena. And how many cards did he keep?
Kept 1 card out of 4.
Kept 1 card? Alright, I would probably just play Hyena.
Alright. Let's fire it out.
If he kept like 4 or 3, I'd be a lot more wary, but yeah. Here hopefully he just does something like Wrath or Wild Growth and we punish the Wild Growth a little bit.
Right. In my experience, they always have Innervate Keeper. Hey, it's our lucky
Alright,
day.
so this is pretty good. Panther into Houndmaster, solid curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's say that he plays like Yeti. Plays Yeti, then
would you ever even like deadly shot the Yeti?
Possibly, but let's see. Yeah, in this case, what is this, Wrath?
Yeah. Yeah, tough consideration here.
Is Innervate the card that he kept?
No, it is not.
Alright, in this case, I'm probably inclined to Houndmaster send face. Now, this is punished by what, like second Wrath? Swipe? Maybe? I think that this is probably just the best play. You don't really feel like deadly shotting that. Warcore is not the most threatening thing they have.
Right.
There's no reason to trade. Right now, you're the aggressor.
Right.
He needs to deal with this.
And we set our Houndmaster up to trade with this Drake, so we do have an answer to the board next turn, depending on what happens.
Right. If he rats that, then he still has to, kill his Drake off, or get a kill next turn.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and kind of, a discussion that we were having a little bit earlier about, like, when to go face, when do you flip the switch. There are a lot of choices with this deck about, when you're supposed to trade and when you're supposed to go face. And this is one of those situations where I think a lot of people would be compelled to play either the 4-2 trading into the Drake or, maybe play Bow and trade in. I don't know. But the bottom line is that oftentimes I've found with this deck more so than others, the consideration of when to go face and when to just not is an important one.
So he feels like trading for some reason. Alright, cool.
Doesn't feel too bad.
I think in this case you always just Bow hero power. There's no need to or if you Buzzard that, like he's compelled to kill it, but I think you want to save Buzzard. Next turn you have Highmane.
Yeah, I feel like setting up with the Eaglehorn Bow is good. Are there any worlds in which you go face with this bow?
He has Harrison maybe, but I don't think he... I've played him a few times. I don't think I've seen Harrison either, so I'm inclined to keep it.
Okay. Yeah, I like keeping the durability on the bow. Harrison is maybe annoying, does line up okay with Savannah Highmane.
This is pretty cool. This is nice. You just Highmane here, but you have Buzzard combo later.
Right, yeah.
So maybe you play that in like 2 turns. or next turn, depending.
Yeah. And considering that we're never going to remove Karen, right? We're pretty much we know already that there's one minion off of which we're going to draw some cards with Unleash.
Actually, last turn I think it was correct to hit face with the bow. He's at 17. You have 9 with the bow and the Highmane, and you have Leeroy in hand. That is already 15, and you could have hero power if he doesn't. Hero power lethal if he doesn't like clear. So I think it was correct to kill it last turn.
Oh, that's interesting.
This turn 4-5-2-4 is turn 7 here. So here you have 6 plus 4, 10, 13. You have 13 damage. Buzzard Unleash is like pretty suboptimal here.
Yeah. Any consideration since we hold the Hunter's Mark of just playing like Deadly Shot and hoping that it hits the 4-5, just kind of stalling the board, or is that too weak of a play?
Honestly, that's okay because you can kill whatever else he plays with Unleash the Hounds, Hunter's Mark next turn.
Right.
I think Deadly Shot, hit face, hero power, maybe the play here. Alright, whatever.
It's okay. I don't think that we're really concerned about the difference between like 4 and 2 attack. And still really healthy here as well at 28, so...
Yeah, here you probably like frags or something. Alright, do you have Harvest Golem, please? Oh, ooze. Alright, so...
not the worst.
Yeah, for sure you Buzzard, Unleash. See what happens.
All right.
He is 8, 11, so you probably need to kill 2 minions here. Alright, I think you probably Hyena.
Okay.
Kill command is not bad. I guess you can tracking 2 for another Hunter's Mark.
Oh, no dice.
Probably hold Boar, and let me think about that. So, you can clear 2 minions here. You kill the Ooze and probably the Azure Drake. He can't kill you next turn with combo. And next turn, you need to deal this much damage. You're gonna have a 6-4, no, an 8-5.
It feels like...
Honestly, I'd probably Boar. I'd probably Boar.
Yeah, it's a card draw, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so trade that shit in.
And now all of a sudden, look at this guy. This little tiny Scavenging Hyena has managed to scavenge 3 little doggies and is now a proud 8-5. And not really a fantastic way to deal with this. We've already seen 1 copy of Swipe come out. It's possible that Swipe goes face. Okay. I think this was what I was talking about a little bit earlier also, of holding off sometimes on playing the Hyena, but this is okay. So we've got 6, 7, 12 this turn. Not quite enough to kill. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's pretty expensive to have to play around combo here. You have to kill one thing and freezing trap the other.
You thinking maybe kill command on...
That's the one option there. Otherwise, you Highmane and...
Well, we can play Highmane... can we play Highmane kill command? I think we're taking too much to the combo there if we do.
You still die to combo if you kill command something without freezing.
Right, right. Have the potential of trotting out the Buzzard plus the Boar with it?
I don't think you really win with that line, but
Yeah.
I guess you've committed, so you have to hero power and hope. Yeah, like here he has to like fucking rag
Right. Yeah, it's
and like
hard.
not hero power, and you have to top that kill command to win. I think that playing Highmane, maybe like one freezing is probably the way.
That's interesting. I think we still died a combo though if we played high main last turn.
Because playing around combo is too much.
Though there is a card.
Yeah, but he hasn't really drawn any cards.
Yeah, there are two cards here. I mean, he's down to 12 in the deck. There's card number 1 and card number 3 here that have been sitting in the hand for a while. I'm inclined to think that those are the combo. Buzzard.
You have to Buzzard, yeah.
All right. Got one Croc.
Yeah, second Boar.
Now, if we're still worried about the combo, I would think that we would skill command this Ancient, right? Or do you feel like something else?
How long has he kept those last two cards?
Turn 1 and turn 3. I have a feeling those are the combo.
Yeah, I mean, you really want to save this Casey, but you also really want a Highmane. I think you play Croc first.
Right, we can find Hunter's Mark still.
Yeah, you would rather find that, but now you have to KC that, I guess.
Yeah, kind of unfortunate they're not top decking all of the things we want. And these kind of heavy hand here as well.
Yeah, now he probably just like swipes you.
Well, we've already seen one swipe come out, so it's certainly possible that doesn't have that second swipe in hand. And even so, I'm not sure if we're too terribly worried. I guess we are worried about swipe, because then we're down to 18, and that's within kill range for this golem with the combo. I think we're happy to see that. I think we're just...
Deck Hunter's Mark?
Oh, I wish. Okay, well, you know, now we're just fucked. Maybe Leeroy into this. You know, I hate to like send a win condition into the 4-6, but really we're just going to lose. The other option is just to pretend that there's no combo in hand.
Yeah, I think you have to pretend there's no combo in hand, send Highmane Bow down the 4-6, and then hopefully, top deck like Houndmaster for lethal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just go face. I do think that Highmane earlier is probably the play, but... Because you can't keep playing around this forever.
Right, exactly. At some point, yeah, just have to ignore it.
Yeah, in the case that he doesn't have it, you're basically just giving him more time to find it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, maybe possible to trot out the Highmane earlier there. I noticed that, there are a couple of times when I've been playing this deck where I think, I want to like solve their board and like cleanly, efficiently deal with what they've got. But sometimes if we do that for just one turn, we'll never have an opportunity to play the Highmane again. Yeah. Okay.
All right,
well,
up to people. Do people want one more, or is we want to call it there?
I think that we've already been at it for 2 hours. I do enjoy doing this quite a bit. But I'm gonna probably call it here. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your evening here, explain this deck to everybody, help out the community. I think that there are a lot of people here that really appreciate having, a little bit more in-depth explanation to a lot of this. So really huge shout out. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, no worries. Really like the community. Happy to give back, and happy that people enjoy the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like we'll be coordinating with Hearthstone-Decks.net, posting the video guide on there as well if anybody's interested. We'll also put a link to that in our in the Discord server so everybody can take a look. If you're brand new to the Classic community and you're interested in joining, that Discord link is in the in our profile here. Come on, join the community, meet people like Phazure, learn from them. It's a great time. Otherwise, I think we'll sign off for the evening, so I'll thank you one more time for being here. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight to learn a little bit more about Midrange Hunter. And I hope to see you maybe next week with where we can do another deck spotlight. Alright. Bye, everybody.